back.
Howdy.
Howdy. My husband asked me today if I could bring him his cowboy hat because I'm picking him up from the airport and we're going to a country concert tonight. Let me get
Oh,
your
nice.
cowboy hat.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Um, Brazilians wear a lot of cowboy hats. I didn't know
That's
that.
true. Yeah, that is true. I guess it depends on like the region though. He does not typically
Oh.
wear a cowboy hat, but he went to
His
like New
family
Mexico
did.
and Texas. Well, that's
Yeah.
because we went down there and they all got a cowboy hat.
Oh, they
Something
gave me a party,
funny.
and I'm like, they all have cowboy hats. Like,
Yeah, that's them. But that's new. That's new as of like 3 months ago. I had
okay.
not seen the cowboy hats before.
All right.
But something funny and hopefully this is not offensive, but like how you just have icks for like no real reason, like they just exist.
Yeah. Like, like,
Ugh,
don't
like
say
I
that word
like
around me. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
the concept. Mine
Yeah.
was the West. Like just like in general, like cowboys, tumbleweeds, ranch towns,
Oh,
horses.
yeah.
Like I actually started watching the show Heartland like 10 years ago because I was like, okay. I gotta like stop just like hating on horses in like the West. Like there's no real reason for this.
Why
It was
horses
exposure
though?
therapy. Because like the cowboys and cowgirls would ride them. I'm like, that's just so cliche. But
Yeah.
through Heartland, it helped me get over some of that ick. But then another one of
Yeah.
my toxic traits is that whatever show I'm watching, I kind of like feel like I have the skills to be able to do that job. So I'm
Stay
riding
away
with
from
my
the
husband.
Sopranos, dude.
But I'm riding with my husband in the car, visiting my
Uh-huh.
grandma, and she lives in a dirt road, like very much like backwoods country.
Yeah.
And we see this horse in the road. And like I'm like 5 seasons deep in Heartland at this point. So I'm like, wait, I know what to do. And so I get out of the car thinking like I can like the horse whisperer or whatever. And I can get this horse back over like out of the road to their pasture. I did not succeed.
What did the
But
horse do?
it was just like, what the hell are you looking at? Looking at
You
me.
got any carrots?
Yeah, it did not budge. But no, it's really funny. Like, whatever show did I watch? And I was like, I could definitely be a lawyer. That one with Meghan Markle. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Suits.
Yeah, I was like, I could definitely be a lawyer after just solely watching the Netflix show.
That's really
Um,
funny.
yeah.
Uh,
Anyways,
so okay, well, I gotta say mine real quick.
yeah, let's hear.
So when because I mask, um, I have a tendency to take on the personalities of whatever show, especially if I binge watch it. And so, for like a year, I binge watched The Sopranos.
Uh-oh.
That was an interesting time of my
Interesting
life.
year.
Yeah. But it's, like, really common for people who mask a lot, like, they'll absorb the characters,
Yeah,
like, subconsciously, like, it's really interesting what binge watching television does to our brains.
it is interesting. Yeah. I feel like I've had that go into like, if I watch a show where, like, there's an accent, I, like, will leave the show, like, talking with an accent a little bit or, like,
Yeah.
thinking in an accent for, like, the next, like, 10 minutes, and it fades off.
Yeah.
I wonder if our listeners also relate to this. Do you take on the persona or, like, personality or feel like you are the character after watching the show, or is that just a Brittany and Ashlyn thing?
No, it can't be just us.
No.
I've
I
been on
don't think
Reddit. I've read people's, experiences. That's how I knew it was a part of masking, because 'cause I'm
Interesting.
like, "Oh." Or, like, what's really bad is that now my daughter is at an age where she's, like, watching Blippi, and
I
I
have no
find
idea what
myself
that is.
talking like Blippi.
What is Blippi?
Blippi is just a grown man dressed up in a costume going to kids' places and acting.
Going to Google, running to Google.
I can't believe you don't know who
Oh,
Blippi is.
yeah,
Blippi.
that also would be an ick, I think. Just
Oh,
looking at
man.
this right now.
Yeah. No, Blippi's dope. And then, like, I look him up and, like, he's an actual person, like, with interests and, like, has a kid and, like, is super cool, and I'm like, "Oh, dang, well, that dude is a genius because he made a ton of money."
Hey, there's something to be said about that. I don't know what
Mhm,
I will do someday when like Jay and I
mhm.
have a child like watching TV because I can't stand like kid music or like kid TV shows or things like that. Like even when I
Yeah, that
was
could
a kid, I was like, this is so annoying.
I know.
So I don't know how that's gonna go over. I don't know if you get used to it, like once the child comes and you're like, okay, I'm ready for it now, or you just pretend everything's fine and
No,
live in
I
the
think
denial.
it's, in my experience, it goes in phases. Like, I was like, "Oh, no, we are never going to listen to baby music." But when Olivia was crying in the car, and I'm like, "You know what? The only thing that gets her to calm down is Wheels on the Bus." That thing the Wheels on the Bus was on
Exactly.
repeat,
Yep, and
and I'm
my
like, "I
friends
don't
are all
even
like
hate
that
this
too.
anymore." Mhm.
Yep.
Yep.
There's a song, like, yesterday I was visiting a friend who has a 2-year-old and or an almost 2-year-old, and the kid just was really wanting to hear Frosty the Snowman. So we played Frosty the Snowman for, like, a
Mhm.
good 15 minutes, and she'd be, like, crying and be like, "Frosty!" And then we play, and she'd be like,
Yep.
bop back and forth a little bit.
Yep.
Kids are funny.
They're hilarious. I love
Well,
kids.
me too. So now I feel like we have a great podcast if we just like talk and ramble for a little while. I feel like our listeners
Yeah.
would also enjoy that.
Yeah.
But let's give them what they came here for, which is chapter 11. How was I supposed to know misreading students' relational needs? And we're almost at the end of our book now.
I
We're
knew, I know.
crazy.
Chapter 11.
Okay. So I
Are
have
you
the
summarizing?
honor of the first
Yep.
summary this time, I believe, right? Okay.
Yes.
Give me that
Let me get
timer.
the okay.
Like stretch before this.
Yeah. Alright. Ready?
Ready.
3, 2, 1, go.
All right. In chapter 11, how was I supposed to know? Misreading students' relational needs. I feel like this chapter kind of just summarized what we know as good teaching in a nutshell. So it talked about the importance of having a connection with your students and how you need to be able to have that connection. If you are to give them any feedback or correction, you're not going to receive it. And also how you have to give agency as well and not separate a child, but connect with them through the learning process. Also, how trust is something that we earn, and we shouldn't go in assuming we have it from students just because they're our student and we're their teacher. It's something that we have to earn, and we shouldn't be alarmed by that fact. And it talked about the ways in which students trust teachers, which were how they look for regard, respect, integrity, and to see if they're competent in their craft. How we misunderstand students' tough fronts that they exhibit. We went through the hard students, hardcore wannabe, and hard enough students for persona types there. And then it also talked about how we misconstrue anger in the classroom and how we misread Black and Brown students' aggression in quotes and how that leads to more inequities in our school. And then it talked about how we misjudge dangerous dignity, which is a position of self respect that students take in response to exclusion, humiliation, or degradation that they experience in school. How we misread students' messages, like basically all the things that we do wrong. And there's a nice table breaking it down. And then talk about the importance of having restorative justice in the classroom. And I'm going to be done now. See, I thought I was going to be done
Alright.
early with this one, Brittany. I had like 3 seconds left.
Man, that was a good summary.
Yes, let me go back
Okay.
to using my parking ticket as a bookmark. No. Yeah, I found before Brittany and I started reading, I found all these like things I just somehow got lodged in this book. And one of them, I was using my parking ticket I received. Well, actually, it's not technically parking. It was for expired registration, which I feel like there should be more notification about when your registration expires, but whatever. And I also have my cat's nail clippers in there as another. So I'm gonna put the nail clippers away, but we'll use that park ticket bookmark. And let there be a reminder to you to check your vehicle's registration after this podcast.
Right.
And now, Brittany, why don't you take the summary away? You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
All right. So in chapter 11, Eric Tashalis touches on a lot of relational aspects of learning, and how relationships and trust are so important to the student in order for the student to engage in any type of learning that requires being vulnerable, or questioning their current understandings. He talked about this a little bit in earlier in the book too, with cognitive dissonance, because when you learn new knowledge, it can sometimes it can compete with the knowledge and understandings you currently have, and if that happens, it can cause anxiety or cognitive dissonance. And so making sure that we build up relationships before we ask students to be vulnerable or question their current understandings is so important. It's fundamental to getting the brain to engage in any type of learning or retention. And then he talks about how adolescents are in a developmental phase where they're building their identity and they're demanding agency, but that doesn't mean that they want a complete and total disconnect. That agency and connection can happen simultaneously, even though it can be awkward and uncomfortable, especially for adults. And it's awkward and uncomfortable for the student, but that doesn't mean that we have to buck against students who want independence and they also want connection. We just have to learn to balance that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
reading this chapter,
Uh-huh.
I feel like it's a lot of just what we talk about all the time. That
Mhm.
honestly might be this book. Like this book is what we talk about all the time. And
Yeah.
one of the things that stood out to me that I was like, okay, we should mention this again, is the trust concept. And
Mhm.
I don't know how many times like I've heard educators talking about how like they have this expectation of kids like just giving them respect or giving them trust, just because that's like their role as being teacher in the classroom.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to recognize that, yeah, your students are not going to automatically trust you, and that's normal, and to be expected. And there was also something mentioned, I don't know if it was in the trust area or respect, but this is also something I've been thinking about for a few years, where kids can't see what they can't see, right?
Mhm.
So, like, they don't know what you're doing after school to help them. They can't see, like, the extra things that you're doing not in front of them. They can only
Right.
see what they can see.
Mhm.
So, when it comes to, like, expecting that trust, expecting that respect because you're putting in all this back into work, you have to
Mhm.
remember that, only so much of that is visible to the students, and it takes time to establish that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we also have to put that on the districts too,
Mm,
in the state, um, to prioritize that in school schedules. Um, because when I talk to teachers, um, a lot of them, their concerns are about getting docked in their evaluation because they're not providing all instructional hours,
yeah,
and they have to follow a scripted curriculum. Um, and that, I mean, comes down to the states and the districts knowing how the brain learns and knowing that we have to prioritize time in the schedule for relationship and trust building activities.
that's true.
And then you're absolutely right. Like students don't see what they don't see. So giving yourself grace and patience and giving the students grace and patience to build that trust in the situations that we're in right now and letting them know like this is what I did
Mhm.
last night, or this is what I did this morning to help you all. Like there's
Yeah.
just communication.
In a nutshell,
Like, yeah,
communicate.
just
And
communicate.
listen. I feel like this chapter could be kind of summarized by those two things: communicate and listen.
Oh yeah.
There's something else that you said that I want to address that. Will it come back? District evaluations, curriculum. Okay, what schools say. I feel like a lot of schools have the vision for like we want to like have this connection. We want it to be like a safe learning environment, a welcoming place where like kids can thrive. So
Mhm.
where do you think the disconnect is happening then? Because like very few schools have the mission statement that
Mhm.
actually aligns up with their execution.
Yeah.
You know?
Honestly, in my experience, transparency and scheduling, um, and making like the systemic changes that need to happen, like
Mhm.
a lot of schedules, a lot of the systems in place in districts have been that way and exist currently because it's always been that way. It's always been what
Mm,
we've done. So as we as new research comes out about the brain, like districts need to have um, a body in place, or a system to check its systems. Um, a lot of districts seem to like they have just become so big and so convoluted that it's hard to make changes that need to happen. Um, so making sure that like so if you're a superintendent or if you are an assistant superintendent, just making sure that you have a system in place for your district that checks those like what is your district doing that's obsolete or archaic, and how can the systems be better balanced and how can the systems be um, like changed when they need to be so that you're not crossing a bunch of like red tape or having to run down certain people or certain documents or certain software or certain data. Like there's just so many obstacles it seems to like be in the way, and it can be bureaucratic or it can
yeah.
be system oriented, but either way I feel like we have to clean it out and make sure that um, schools can adapt to the research that's coming out that is best practice.
Yeah. And then also like when you face that research and you experience some of that cognitive dissonance,
Mhm.
to welcome it and to work through it and not like shut it down or dismiss or
Yeah,
like pretend you never read it when you read something that's conflicting with what your school's doing. Punishments.
right.
I feel like that's a big one that like
Mhm.
there's so much research about that. Yeah, in so many schools, we see it happening still.
Right. Which is really interesting because there's so many books published on organizational change theory, so much research, so many good like practices and knowledge out there that we could be equipping our admin with, and we're not.
Yeah.
Even though if you look at like the top, um, the uh, top companies in the United States, top performing companies and top performing organizations, they are using these change theories, these practices, whenever they have to make a big systemic change in their organization. So I guess there's like a disconnect between like the business world and the education world. Probably just like triggered a bunch of people with that statement.
We probably do that every episode though, honestly.
Yeah.
If
But we
they've
should
gotten this
be.
far, they're used to it.
Right. Like, but I feel like we should be. We should be
Yeah.
looking to see, okay, how is Google, how is places like General Electric,
Mhm.
how did, Walgreens like
Oh, yeah.
reconfigure, their when they were going through a huge change, how did they organize it? What did
Mhm.
the executives do? We should be looking at stuff like that. And I don't I don't know if it's just like we don't have the time, which is probably in the resources, which is
Yeah.
historically an issue, but it still needs to happen because
Yeah.
we need to be changing.
True. And
Yeah.
on the concept of triggering people, I say we look at that list of the things. So
Okay.
the interpretive gap. So educator and student differences often revealed in disciplinary interactions. And this page, if you have the physical book, highlight it, put a sticky note in it, page 270. And if you don't have this book yet, buy the book solely for these 2 pages, okay? So
Yeah.
this gives us a list of educators' point of view and how it differs from a student's perspective and their point of view. So I think that Brittany, you and I should go through this list and share some
Yeah.
of these with the audience. Maybe we do the first page and see if it's too much,
Okay.
or we can unpack it then.
So am I doing the teacher's point of view?
Sure.
Okay. So teacher's point of view, learning comes before relationships.
And the student's point of view is relationships come before learning.
Teacher's point of view, misbehavior results from a lack of control.
A student's, I misbehave because I'm powerless.
Teachers, misbehavior causes a lack of learning.
Lack of learning causes misbehavior.
Misbehavior gets you the attention you don't want.
Misbehavior often gets me the attention I do want.
Students come to school to learn.
I come to school to learn and socialize.
Relationships should not displace work.
Work should not displace relationships. I like how your voice is changing for these 2, Britt.
Yeah. Relationships. Oh, okay. Hold on. Unilateral power is a response to student resistance.
Resistance is a response to unilateral power.
Oh, the students are tired.
I'm bored.
Schoolwork and homework are for assessing and expanding learning.
Schoolwork and homework are for pleasing my teacher, getting points, and avoiding failure.
Some students have no ability to stay focused.
Some teachers have no ability to teach me things that are interesting or relevant to my life.
Being a young teacher makes it hard to establish authority.
It's often easier to connect with younger teachers because they tend to be more familiar with youth culture.
If I don't trust you, I can't give you agency.
If you don't give me agency, I can't trust you. And before we continue, that's a really big one, I think. Like even working with teachers, like when I coach teachers or I talk to people inside of my course, if we talk about something like doing a brain break or like making a joke or having a connecting moment, a lot of teachers who are in the survival mode in their classroom, they're terrified of doing that.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, if I do that, I'm going to lose control of the class. And see, you have to, or you're going to lose control over the class. You know, like you have to be able to have those connecting moments or it's going to be wild.
Yeah.
The Wild West, if you will.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the hardest thing to get coaching clients to do. But it's also the one thing that when they do it, they come back and they're like, I can't believe, like every time they're like, I can't believe it. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I told you. You gotta trust me. Like, okay.
I love it.
So, where are we? So, the meaning I make of our interaction is ours.
The meaning you make of our interaction is yours.
Care equals the expression of concern and the efforts to help.
Care equals knowing me and my needs, protecting me, giving me options, guiding me, and pushing me to do my best. And this is the other one where I think that we get lost in. So the teacher perspective is it's the expression of concern and efforts to help. So from the teacher perspective, we feel like we care if we're like putting in the work to help this kid, right? Like we're grading their work, we're looking at their data, we're calling their families. We're like, okay, we obviously care about you because you're doing all these things, but that's not how the kid's going to perceive it. You know, we got to speak child. We got to connect.
Right. I feel like we have to, I guess we have to get to the point where we are using a shared definition of care,
Mm.
you
And
know?
that's something you can talk to your kids about too.
Mhm.
The other big coaching thing that is always like an moment when you're coaching, probably for you too, is
Mhm.
when I'm talking to a teacher about something. And then like they're like racking their brain trying to figure out what's going on with this student or this class. And I'm like, have you asked them? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, that might be
Yeah.
a good place to start.
Yep.
Like we just completely forget, like, oh yeah, we have 30 people in front of us, so we could also ask their opinion on the situation.
Yes. Yep. Uh, that's funny
Hmm.
because that's
You have that
yeah, I
experience
think it's
too?
across the board. Yeah. Yeah.
We should
Like
do an
I
episode sometime on like the common things that we experience coaching teachers.
yeah, yeah.
Also, if any of you are interested in working with Brittany and I, we have different offers and programs on our website. My coaching
Mhm.
program, I mean, like a mini version of it is my course. Let's not do that again because you have 4 live sessions. And there's a different
Mhm.
tier you can pick where you have like an extra session each week working with me. Or we have like a full blown coaching program where you can work with me one on one, work with me in a small group setting, and then I support you for months at a time there. And how do you help teachers, Britt?
So I have the neighborhood, which is a really affordable program. It's 240 for the year, and we meet live weekly. Uh, and then I have small group coaching available, and I'm uh, specifically targeting ADHD and neurodivergent teachers. So that's where my specialty lies. Um, and I have a 4-month program for that. Um, I do have an opening right now. I don't really market it because I like to keep it small.
Yeah.
But if you are interested or if you're struggling and you have and you consider yourself neurodivergent, I would definitely get a hold of me because you could do the neighborhood or you could do small group if you want to.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Brittany and I both have different offers too, depending on where you are. So if you're just
Mhm.
someone who's like, I feel like I need help, but I don't know where to start, you can just slip into our DMs and tell us like, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. Like, what do you think would be most helpful for me? Because
Yeah.
between the two of us, like we have 2 memberships. You have the ebook. I have a curriculum. We both have our
Mhm.
own kinds of coaching programs that meet different teachers' needs. We
Yeah.
both work with districts, so like we'll be able to help you and take care of you and get you the support you need.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, so what about quotes? Let's do some quotes.
Let's do it.
Hold on, I had a quote. I don't know. I'm supposed to star my quotes, and I never do. Um, honestly, I feel like this chapter was my favorite chapter, and I know, like, I feel like we say that a lot,
I think we say
but
that for every chapter that we read.
yeah, but I feel like this chapter I connected with the most.
Yeah.
Um, I will say, the section where they're talking about, I think her name was Kyle Yang, the research on fronts.
Yeah.
And then there's like the actual like hard students
Hmm.
and then wanna be hard and then um hard but really just wanna like survive school and they're
Yeah.
really interesting. Hard enough.
Hmm.
So hard enough. So there's hardcore wannabes. So hardcore students, hardcore wannabes, and hard enough. When I first read that, I was really kind of taken aback, and I was like, "How am I gonna, get on here and call these students hardcore, hardcore wannabe, and hard enough, and not
Yeah.
feel icky?" Um, and because I always read and I walk at the same time, and I'm like,
Wait, what? Like,
I
do you
read,
listen?
no, I read and I walk.
Like
So for
outside or
me,
on a treadmill? I'm trying to envision how this
on
happens
a
without walking
track,
into something. Interesting.
yeah, I process information way better if I'm moving.
Mhm.
Mhm. So, okay, so I was reading this section and just the language, it kind of made me feel just icky as
Yeah.
especially because this is talking about Black and brown students, and the tough fronts, like and I'm just like, well, the entire premise is that these kids are living in an environment that requires them to have a tough front. And
Hmm.
I'm going to get on here and I'm going to talk about it. And I'm just like, but it's our fault that they
Yeah.
live in these environments. Like it's our, it's our inaction and our now with um the unwillingness to pay attention or to spend time with trying to deconstruct the systems and the laws and the economic barriers in place that keep these kids in these environments that make them have to adopt these fronts.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to, get on a podcast and I'm going to talk about it like, oh, this is what we can do to help them. I mean, honestly, what we could do to help them is end segregation.
Hmm.
So I'm just going to throw that out there. And to stop acting like it doesn't exist. Like,
Yeah.
or, like the immense pockets of poverty that exist in every city, like, and to stop pretending that, it, I don't know, it's not a thing because it is. So that was my thoughts on tough friends and hardcore wannabe language. Like,
No, I hear you. And I feel like reading through this stuff too, it can just get us. I feel like for both of us, we just get like so like this is
yeah,
the state of things.
right.
No. Um, for me, different area, but it was
Mhm.
toward the end of the chapter, and it was talking about restorative justice,
Mm,
which is another, I guess, kind of like a buzzword. I feel like a lot of people do it the wrong way. But
yeah.
this quote's a little bit longer from page 273. It's talking about how, like, after you have the like transgressor and the victim like come together to talk about what happened, it's talking about the point of this interaction. So the point in these interactions is not to legalistically clarify what did or did not happen. Far too many disciplinary discussions get bogged down in the investigation phase, while determinations of the impact of the event or full analysis of the pros and cons of various responses are often shortchanged. The goal of restorative justice is instead to describe the impact of the event so that victims feel heard and the transgressor is held relationally accountable. The point is also not to shame transgressors or to make them feel bad, but to confront them with the consequences of their actions and appeal to their desire to belong, to be trusted, to have good relationships, and to move with purpose toward behaviors that are productive rather than destructive. And I liked this one a lot, especially, I feel like for a few reasons. Like, number one, how disciplinary discussions get bogged down with technicality. Like, I see that happening so frequently, talking
Mhm.
to teachers, talking to schools, like hearing about disciplinary protocols. But then also like how we treat the transgressor, I think is huge. And
Yeah.
with restorative justice, it's not about shaming.
Mhm.
And so much what we do in school, like even schools I've worked in where like they use restorative justice, they really don't because it's still focused
No,
on shame.
it's
We have
on
yeah,
retribution.
we have such a hard time decoupling those things.
Yeah.
Um, and how we, the second part here that I want to talk about is how we want to confront this kid with the consequence of their actions and appeal to their desire to belong and to be trusted and have good relationships. And this is what I talk to my clients about all the time inside the Village Plus program. Like even this week we were talking about like how you want students, like when you're talking to them, you're not trying
Mhm.
to like get them to apologize. The goal is for you to like number one, connect with them and relate and like be regulated and see where they're coming from. And then number two, like help them see themselves in the situation and like
Mm.
what played out. And you can't go about doing that if you're starting from a deficit-based lens. You know,
Yeah.
if you go into a conversation being like, why would you act like that? Why would you want to make her feel this way? The kid's not going to listen. They're going to shut down.
Mhm.
You know, you have to go into it trying to like understand the kid, like being on their side, and then showing them like, okay, like I don't think this is your intention, but when you said these things, this is what that person did.
Mhm.
Was that your goal? What were you trying to achieve? Like, what did you want to do?
Right.
And I think oftentimes for a kid, like helping them recognize, like sometimes they say things or they don't want to like take something back because they feel like that undermines what they feel. And recognizing that it doesn't. Am I being too abstract here?
No, I think with recognizing how they feel. So it just took me a second to process that. Like
Okay.
they're making they are focused on you as if you're trying to distract the how they were harmed, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, like when you have conversations with kids and you're like, well, it's not going anywhere. But your goal is to try to get them to apologize. And they're like, I don't want to apologize because like that makes it feel like everything they experience is being ignored.
Mhm.
You have to like
Oh, yeah.
pick a different angle. You know, you got to go and understanding them and seeing their side
Mhm.
and be like, hey, like, I see you. Like, I know why you did this. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
But what were you actually trying to do? You
Yeah.
know, was your goal to insult them or was your goal to stand up for yourself? Okay, so if that's your goal, how can we go about doing that?
Yep.
You know, those are the
Yeah, 'cause
conversations we have to have.
it comes down to, as teachers, what are your goals? Like,
Yeah.
are your goals to limit the behavior? Are your goals to get the student to engage? Because if your goal is to get the student to engage and to prevent the behaviors that you don't want to see in your classroom, then, having um, punitive policies and practices, or feeling like, you have to get back because you're irritated or the student is, disrupting the learning environment.
Yeah.
They're not going, those perspectives and those mindsets are not going to help you get to
Mm-mm.
your goal.
Yeah.
They're not. You can keep doing them if you want. They're
It's
not.
going to be very ineffective for you. You're going to give
Yeah.
yourself a big headache. That was my post yesterday, which I'm very proud of my edits for, by the way. You should go check it out after this, Brittany.
Okay.
The post from February 13th, 2025. Took me way too long to edit the red and the green being interplaced by green.
Oh,
Anyways.
yeah.
No, I feel like this is all like how you navigate conflict. Like conflict resolution, that's one of the things I ask teachers about when I message them on Instagram. And they're telling me about like their problems and what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And like we could dive into it, but then I'm like, okay, have you actually been taught conflict resolution strategies? 9 out of 10, that's hard to say.
Hmm.
9 out of 10 times, the answer is no.
Yeah.
You know, all we're taught
I
to
mean,
do is like
people in
bribe kids
general.
into getting what
Yeah.
they want. Yeah. And then we have to
And to
model
avoid.
those things. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And avoid conflict. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I would say, like, what if you're experiencing like this impulse to get back at the student, um
Mm,
you're in a state of fight or flight, right?
yeah, you
Like
are.
you are
Survival
not
brain.
yeah, you're not regulating your stress response, and you have so much stored stress in your body that it has influenced uh, your cognition, and it's influenced your thoughts and your perception on students and their behavior, and you have to take action to uh, burn off that stress and start regulating your system. And there are strategies out there. Doctors, first responders, they are all taught strategies to manage stress response. They
Yeah.
exist. They are out there. You need to find them.
And
Um,
both Brittany and I also have things that can help you with that too. Like Brittany has the workshop
mhm.
series that touches on that. I'm holding a
Yep.
free live event next week, depending on when you hear this. Also talking about understanding your own triggers. We talk about inside my course. Let's not do that again. Like there's so much
Mhm.
information out there to help you make that transition.
Yeah.
And I think that's also kind of going to lead into my action step
Mhm.
too, which is that when you are engaging in an interaction with the student, listen to what your body's saying. You know, if you see a kid who's like shutting down, like puts their head on their desk, if your body feels like tight and feels like stressed out or anxious,
Mhm.
then you're not going to be in a good position to help that kid. What you want to feel is connection. So when you see that kid doing that, the goal is to be in a place where you're like, I wonder what's going on. Like, oh, I care about them.
Mhm.
Like, I want them to feel okay. It's like an entirely different feeling coursing through your body when you're in the right state to have that conversation versus when you're in a place where you're probably going to make it a bit worse. And so my action step would be to take advantage of one of the things that Brittany and I offer, either her workshop series, my course, the free event I'm hosting next week, to start learning about yourself so that you can be in a place where you can help kids trust you. You can make connections with them and you can teach them well.
Yes, I totally agree. My action step is going to be giving students the benefit of the doubt, that's hard if you're dysregulated.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that goes back to, figuring out how to regulate what exercises work with you or for you, knowing your triggers, knowing your physiological responses, um, and knowing the exercises that's going to calm your stress response down. But I feel like we have to, if we want to build trust, if we want to build relationships with our students, with anybody, with human beings in general, we have to come from a perspective of giving the benefit of the doubt. It's
Asset-based
going to
lens.
trigger, it's going to trigger your fight or flight less. It's going to make you more empathetic, which is going to increase your oxytocin. It's going to, and you know what? I'm neck deep in sensory research because the March workshop is all about sensory processing and how it influences our fight or flight and our nervous system. And moving your body, moving your body can not be emphasized enough.
Yeah.
We have to be, whether it's yoga, whether it's intense physical exercise, it's weightlifting. We are a generation that does not move our bodies enough. And it is influencing our sensory processing, our autonomic nervous system. It is influencing our mental health, and it's influencing the chemicals in the brain and the myelination, and it's increasing the frequency of schizophrenia and oh gosh, do, 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 do. What's the neurological disorder where you can't remember anything? You've got that happens dementia. That's why
Alzheimer's?
dementia, Alzheimer's and dementia,
Mm.
because dementia is dopamine related. So you need to get not only for your sensory system and to like ground yourself and to take care of your autonomic nervous system and to control your stress response, but to also get the good chemicals in your brain that is going to prevent you from developing mental health disorders and dementia and schizophrenia. So we need to be moving our bodies more.
Love
Benefit
it.
of the doubt, move your body more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Brittany and I will link a whole bunch of the resources that we mentioned
Mhm.
to the description of this podcast. And I hope that you guys have a great week. Are you ready for our sign off now,
Yay.
Britt?
Hi.
You ready for our
Am I
sign
ready?
off? Are you
Yeah,
ready
we
for the
hope.
sign off?
Yeah. We hope that
Woo!
you feel remoralized and
And re-energized.
until next time.
All right. Bye, everybody.